If you're looking for a podcast that packs in sound property advice, as well as offering you an insight into making the world of property effective and ultimately work for you, you're in the right place. Hosted by Arsh, the original property rebel. He's written an Amazon bestseller, created the Property Investor app, the UK's first, and is an experienced property mentor. More importantly, he talks the talk and walks the walk.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Property Rebel with your host Arsh Ilahi. And in today's session, we're going to be talking about tenants who claim housing benefit, or depending on what you want to call them, DSS tenants or housing benefit tenants. Before we do that, let's say a quick hello and welcome to all new subscribers and all new listeners. Hopefully you're enjoying the Property Rebel podcast, and hopefully you're taking away loads of golden nuggets and you're implementing these into your property portfolio. So let's get straight into it. Tenants on benefits. Naturally, there is a stigma attached to them. And the stigma attached to them is that they're not very good. They're not very good people. They're not very good tenants. They're not very good payers. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story today about benefit tenants and how, in actual fact, and this actually shocks quite a lot of people, that in my whole portfolio, I would say we've got an 80-20 split in terms of benefit to working. So we've got 80% of our portfolio of people on benefits. So as you can appreciate, when people say that they don't like benefit tenants, I kind of question why. And I kind of also understand why. And I'm going to give you my reasonings for this. Now, back in the year 2000, when I left university, I decided that I was going to look after my father's small portfolio. And at the time, he had majority of professional tenants. And what he found that the tenants were pretty much paying in arrears and running off, owing large debts, and which also meant that we had large voids. So when I took over the portfolio, someone approached me. They were on benefits. Back then, we could apply to the council for housing benefit, and the rent would have been paid direct to us every 4 weeks. And the rents were more favourable to a person on benefits than it were the professional market or the private market, shall we say. So I put in one benefit tenant. The rent came in, they kept the property clean, they were extremely grateful, and it worked extremely well. Slowly but surely, I kind of made the decision that every working tenant that left, we would now replace them with a tenant on benefits. Now that worked extremely well. So every 4 weeks, I would get a schedule either by email or by post. Back then it was post. And in that schedule, it would say tenant's name, tenant's address, here's the amount that they've paid, and here's the period they paid it for. And it was brilliant because all we'd have to do is literally tick off the list. Yes, in. And it was great. Fantastic in actual fact. Then come 2008. The local authority decided that they wanted to start to empower people on benefits and give them more financial responsibility. So they brought in a scheme called the Local Housing Allowance, or if you're used to the acronyms, LHA. And with LHA, they started to pay the tenants every 2 weeks into the account of their name. So this made it now very risky for us, because as you can appreciate, a person that's never really had a large amount of money hitting their bank every 2 weeks, naturally, there's going to be a level of temptation. And what we found is that there were levels of temptation, and tenants were thinking, do I pay the landlord? Or do I buy that new TV? Or do I go and buy the kids some new clothes, or this, that and the other? So as you can appreciate, the rent on average room or flat is about £100 a week. So every 2 weeks, the council would pay, or the government would pay that tenant £200. So it was a good thing from a landlord's point of view because it allowed us to calculate our risk. Previously, our risk was 4 weeks. Now our risk is 2 weeks. So there are pros and cons, and I'm going to try and go through as many of these as possible with you. So every 2 weeks, the tenant would get paid, and the government wanted to pay the tenant in the form of a bank transfer. Now, when it's a bank transfer, instantly it becomes liquid cash. So what we tended to do is we asked for our tenants to be paid by cheque. So they would send them a green cheque every 2 weeks. So just so you know, this is very well documented in my book called Boom Bust and Back Again, which is available on Amazon, and it's actually a section called the green cheque. So every 2 weeks on a Monday, we had a list of every tenant who was receiving a cheque. Now, I was the first landlord in the UK to approach Lloyds and say to them, guys, I want third-party indemnity so that if the tenant signs the back of that cheque, I can then bank it. The reason why I requested the tenant to have a cheque is because in order for that tenant to try and liquidise that cheque or to cash that cheque, they would then have to go to somewhere like cash converters or put it in their bank. And then they had 3 days, which meant that as soon as we knew about it, we were literally on top of it. So I'll give you a little bit of a story about this. So every Monday we had a list. And in actual fact, it got to a point where we had a team of people actually waiting in areas, waiting for the postman to go and deliver the checks. As soon as the checks or the post went through his door, my guys would knock on the door. Hi, Mr. Tenant. I appreciate that, it's quite early in the morning, but I appreciate that your rent check has just arrived. They look through the post. Oh, yeah, here it is. They would open it. They'd sign the back of it. They'd hand it over to my guy. My guy would bring it back into the office, and we would then bank it. And the rent is considered as collected. Now, as you can appreciate, that was quite time intensive. We got reported to by the Royal Mail, reported us. We had to have meetings with the Royal Mail as a result of that. And they kind of understood the reason why we were doing it. So in that respect, they said, we allow you to, well, they couldn't stop us from sitting outside the property. But previously, what would happen is as soon as the postman was walking up to the door, my guys would then start following them to the door. We came to a compromise where we would allow the postman to leave the property or even walk down the street before we'd knock on the door. Now, that worked really well, but we were working really hard and it started to grind on me, and I started to think, have we really made almost like quadruple the task here? If we had a working tenant, we would just collect the rent once a month. Now we're collecting it twice a month, plus we're having to run around. And I really started to question whether we had the right strategy in place. It didn't take me long to come up with a solution. So welcome the world of a credit union. Now, if you don't know what a credit union is and you've got tenants on benefits, you really need to. So here's your golden tip for the day. Understand what a credit union is. So a credit union is like a bank, but they create almost like mini jam jar accounts for tenants. So if I was a tenant and I was on benefits, I would go to a credit union and I'd say that I want my rent to come into this credit union. Now, the credit union, the account is in the name of the tenant, so it ticks all the boxes for the government. Now, the tenant can then instantly say that as soon as the rent comes into this credit union account, it will then instantly be passed onto the landlord, so the tenant doesn't actually get to see any of it. I'm a firm believer, and I still am to this day, that tenants do not intentionally come to rip landlords off. You do get the odd few, what I would call the professional thieves. However, maybe I'm a bit cynical, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I'm a big believer, and I've seen tens of thousands of tenants on benefits. I've seen the good, the extremely good, the ugly, and the extremely bad. When we're talking about the extremely bad, we're talking about the tenants that are on extreme drugs, that are chasing around, running for, doing all kinds of criminal activities to generate money to feed their habit. As well as that, they have associations with other like-minded people. And before you know it, you've got yourself a drug den. So you've got not only the drug dealer, you've got all the other drug users. And naturally, it's not a place that you want to be. Believe it or not, I've been there. I've had to clean it. When I say clean it, I've had to evict. And I've had to clean the place up and make sure that we never got back to that place again. We then get just some tenants on, the way that I categorize tenants on benefits, you've got those lifelong tenants, those that perhaps have never worked, those that do want to work but just don't get that lucky break. You've got those that have just come out of work and unfortunately just on benefits as a result. And COVID-19 is a great example of that. How many people have been laid off and now having to claim benefits? And then you've got literally just the worst style, the ones that have almost what I consider the drug society. And that's the society that I just don't want to touch. Believe it or not, the ones that are in and out of work also are quite difficult to deal with. And the reason why I say that is because 1 minute they're working, the next minute they're on benefits, which means that the benefits takes a few weeks for it to catch up and process the claim. So that tenant will always be in arrears. So going back to my tenants on benefits. So I sat down with the credit union as the first landlord to do this. And I sat down and we created a system. So the system was the tenant goes into the credit union, creates an account. They then come to us. We then have a look at their account details. We then put those account details on the housing benefit application. Now, here's another tip. If you've got a tenant on benefits, don't allow them to do their housing benefit paperwork. Because naturally, once you've handed over the keys, the sense of urgency for them to do that paperwork is non-existent. Oh yeah, I'll get around to doing it later this week, Arsh. Okay, next week, something come up, my dog died, or whatever it may be. So always sit them down and do the paperwork with them before you give them the keys. Once you've given them the keys, you're legally bound to them for 6 months, and that will determine, that's when the problems start. So I always make sure that they've got the credit union paperwork in their hand, which means that they've gone and opened an account. They then come to us. We have to do all the housing benefit paperwork, make sure we've got all the correct identification, make sure that we've filled out all the housing benefit forms, make sure that we've gone through our checklist to make sure that everything's in place, and we submit the application form. Only once that's done, then we hand over the keys, because at least that way I've got some assurance knowing that applications in, we know that we're going to get paid, and then my team or my admin team track it just to make sure. There will be odd occasions where the council come back and ask some questions. We also get the tenants to sign a third-party authority form just to say that they're happy for us to deal with their claim on their behalf, and that works extremely well for us, and it works extremely well for them. It removes the pressure away from them, so we're not calling them saying, go up to the council, do this, do that, do the other. And it allows my office to literally call the council, say, okay, Mr. Smith moved in on this day, he put his application in on this day, can you give us an indication as to where we are with the claim? Is it live? Are you still processing it? Do you require any further information? If so, what's the information, and can we get it for you? And will that be the complete application, and will we then be paid? So we go through that whole process. Now, the one thing I will also say is that if you're taking a tenant on benefits, always structure your tenancies correctly, because you've got to look at how the benefit market works. And it could mean that you actually lose rent if you don't structure it correctly. So the benefits system works almost like weekly, or now the universal credit system actually works in calendar month. I'll come on to universal credit in a second. So going back to 2008, they paid every 2 weeks. So my tenancies were almost like, we set up the tenancies, it was either £100 a week or every £200 every 2 weeks. Whereas if it's a professional tenant, they get paid once a month, it would be £430 a calendar month. Here's another tip. Did you know that there is 52 weeks, 26 fortnights, 13 full weeks, or 12 calendar months? Now, if you don't structure your tenancies correctly, you could actually lose a month in rent every year. And not many people know that. So if it's £100 a week, people automatically assume it's £400 a month. No, it's not. Because £100 a week is £433 a month. And the way that you calculate that is £100 times that by 52 weeks, divided by 12 calendar months. And you do the calculation, it's £433.33. Whereas if you're doing £400 a month, you're actually working yourself out of £33 a month, which when you look at it over a year, best part of 366, or best part of £400 anyway. So moving on, so that's what we did. Universal credits worked credit unions worked extremely well, and it really did so up until a couple of years ago. So we're in 2020, so I think 2017, 2018, the government decided to say, I'll tell you what, we're paying tenants already, why don't we now amalgamate their living benefits, so their job seekers allowance, their income support, their all the other benefits that they get to live on a day-to-day basis, and why don't we put that and the housing benefit together, and why don't we pay the tenants in one lump sum to mimic what is considered a working wage, so they get paid once a month, and that money will now go to the tenant, and we'll call this super benefit, called it universal credit. Wow. Now before, if you imagine the temptation before them being paid a larger sum every 2 weeks, can you imagine the temptation now of them receiving an even bigger pay packet at the end of the month? Now you've got to remember that these guys don't generally, and I say this with the best of respect, and if you are on benefits, I've got a huge amount of respect for you, because it is a tough life. The reason why I say that is because can you imagine that they have to now start to learn how to budget for a whole month? Before, they only had to budget every week or every 2 weeks. Now they're having to double that and budget for a whole month with no training, and literally they've said, okay, I'll tell you what, before we're paying you every 2 weeks, now you have to pay I'm going to pay you every month. I understand why the government did it. The government wanted to get people in a mindset so that if they were to go into work, this is how it's going to operate. You work all month, then you get paid at the end of the month. And in that month, you then have to budget for your council tax, water rates, electricity, gas, your rent, your food, your outgoings, your entertainment, whatever it may be. Now, what we've done here is that we've had to, universal credit has been a nightmare. And the reason why I say that is because the temptation has become far too great. But luckily, because we had the systems back from the local housing allowance, where we had the credit unions in place, we've adapted that even further with the credit union, so that the credit union now receives all the universal credit. And as a result of that, the tenants now, all the money goes into this. So let's just imagine that the tenant gets collectively, including council tax benefit, housing benefit, job seekers allowance, child benefit, and all the other bits and pieces, they get £1,000 a month. Now, the £1,000 a month goes into the credit union account. Now, remember what I said about a jam jar account? What the tenant can do, they can go to the credit union and say, well, out of that £1,000 a month, instantly, I want you to put £500 into the rent account, I want you to put £100 into the council tax account, I want you to put £50 into electric, £50 into gas, and then the rest into almost like a living account where I've got a debit card for. So that's what we structured for all our tenants. So every tenant that came to us, straight away, if I'm honest, I didn't care really what they did with the rest of it, but the rent element had to go into the rent jam jar. And as the moment it hit that rent jam jar, it would then instantly come to us, so that there is no temptation. So let's just say that all the universal credit payments get paid on midnight. As soon as it hits the credit union account at midnight, literally, because the algorithms and the software that the credit union's using, 1 minute past midnight, that money will now hit the landlord's account or my account. So by the time that the tenant wakes up at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever it may be, the next morning, and they go to the credit union, that rent has already been taken out and already forwarded onto the landlord, and it works extremely well. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about this, I developed this further where I actually helped develop a credit union. It's actually called Tasker Payment Services. It's something that I've helped develop over the last few years, and it works extremely well. So whether you're a landlord in Bournemouth, whether you're a landlord in Birmingham, whether you're a landlord in Scotland, I'm not sure about Scotland, but definitely up north, Sunderland, etc. if you've got tenants on benefits, County Durham, etc., where you're in a high benefit-led area, you should be using tasker payment services or, worst case scenario, a local credit union. Get to understand who they are. Now, just so that you know, credit unions, they do charge a fee, but if you calculate what that fee is, our credit union charges £5 a month per payment. So they make quite a lot of money out of us, so they treat us really well. So, but in the same respect, would you rather lose £500 or would you rather pay £5? That's what I would ask you. So tenants on benefits, they can be phenomenal. So today's really session is more so about how the benefit system has worked. I can do a whole different podcast, or maybe the next session may be on the different kinds of tenants and how they actually perform. Because believe it or not, I've got some people who are on benefits who have been in my properties for the best part of 15, 16, 17 years and have been in the same room with no debt levels and kept the place in immaculate condition and no voids. That is the perfect tenant. So I'll touch base on that on the next session. So there we have it, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed that session. It's a little bit more in depth than I thought I was going to go into, but I'm glad that I did, because that gives you all the intricacies and all the stuff that I've had to challenge over the years. And it has been a challenge, but hopefully I've come up with a system that you guys can really benefit from. As always, if you like the thought of this and you like the thought of free education and you want more free education, why don't you pop over to my YouTube channel. Every Thursday at 4 p.m, we release a new video, and it's on all different kinds of things: how to acquire property, where to acquire property, how to find them, where to find them, how to fund them. So if you like the thought of that, go to YouTube and type in Arsh. As well as that, if you want to connect with me on social media, you can do. You can search for Arsh on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram. If you haven't already done so, please download the Property Investor app. It's the UK's first property investment marketplace, which showcases all kinds of property deals all over the country. Completely free for you to do that. All you got to do is go to www.propertyinvestorapp.co.uk. Alternatively, if you have a smartphone, you can go to the App Store. So whether it's iOS or Apple, go to the App Store, or if you've got an Android phone, go to Google Play and type in Property Investor. It takes approximately 2 minutes to download and register, and it's completely free. And within minutes, you'll see all over 200 deals, which include below market value deals, rent to rent deals, lease option deals. So these are all the kinds of deals that property investors are after, and they're there in the palm of your hand. So go over there and download now. On that note, guys, as always, I wish you all to be safe, well, healthy and happy. And I'll speak to you all on the next episode. Thank you and bye-bye.
The large majority of people make a positive change if they take immediate action. So act now. Download the Property Investor app and join Arsh on his social media channels to excel your property journey.